for some reason, there are some atheists who are on the very far right. And to me, that misses the point, because if I'm fighting against Christianity and capitalism because I want people to be more free, I have no idea why there are so many atheists on the far right who are like in the popular, they're in the limelight of like new atheism, right? And a lot of people draw from even Ayn Rand. So Ayn Rand, like, she founded this concept called objectivism, which is to say that existence exists and the material world is all we know, so anything supernatural or mystical should be thrown out. So, of course, like, Christians kind of pushed her aside and weren't interested in Ayn Rand's ideology because they obviously are theists. But Ayn Rand, her background was from Soviet Russia. So she grew up in the far left authoritarian regime of Soviet Russia, the Soviet Union. And so she was reacting to being controlled and exploited from the far left, right? So I totally understand why she was kind of essentially like a conservative atheist, but it's just so, first of all, it's so funny when like specifically Christian conservatives of today love her stuff, because it's like she was so devout, like openly atheist. But on the other hand, like the fact that other atheists still kind of tout some of the same far right stuff really honestly like is so disheartening for me, because that doesn't seem to be standing up for the people, which I would have loved to have seen from a lot of like I've seen kind of transphobically questionable rhetoric from Sam Harris. I saw we're going to watch a video right now from Genetically Modified Skeptic on YouTube. And I saw his video about why he did an interview with Richard Dawkins, and one of the many reasons was because Richard Dawkins has said openly like transphobic and non-feminist rhetoric in interviews, and it blows my mind. Like, first of all, why do you care if you literally believe that we create our own morality, and you're not touting the false narrative like religious fundamentalists that there is such a thing as absolute truth morality? Like, how can you fucking care about one how people live their life? It just blows my mind. I think Hitchens was considered on the right, but more like the United Kingdom conservative. Yeah. So this is kind of what I want to cover in this next video that we're going to watch. The Genetically Modified Skeptic. So we're going to react to this. We're going to watch it together and see what is going on and why the anti-woke right has so many atheists.
Atheists are consistently measured to be the most left-leaning, LGBTQ-supporting, politically active religious identity group in the United States. Recently, 16 major American atheist, humanist, and secular organizations put out a collective statement affirming their commitment to protecting LGBTQ rights. This included some heavy hitters in the atheist world, like American Atheists, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and Secular Coalition for America. Swing your fists in a room full of atheists and you're basically guaranteed to hit someone on the political left, who will then probably chastise you for your transgression against a utilitarian ethic. So how in Sagan's name is there an atheist to anti-woke pipeline, and why do religious anti-woke types seem to embrace the guys that fall down it? Plenty of quality journalism and sociological research has been done on this, and I encourage you to read it. But as someone who has been deep in the atheist world for several years now, I think I can add to the conversation. Discussions on this often center around algorithmic radicalization and the fact that the lion's share of atheists are young white men. And while those are very important factors to consider, there is still more to it. Welcome to what is basically an old school GM Skeptic list video where I explain stuff by making a list and maybe bringing on a special guest to explain one of the points. If you love listing stuff and watching others list stuff, then drop me a number 1 in the comments. Idealism over materialism. While atheists typically believe that there is no literal realm occupied only by mind, ideas, or spirit, but rather that everything, including the mind and its ideas, are a product of the natural, it's fairly common for atheists to focus on ideas as the root of material circumstances, rather than the other way around. After 9/11, certain atheist writers in the US responded to the attack by placing blame squarely on religious belief. One such response was found in Sam Harris' 2004 book, The End of Faith. A belief is a lever that, once pulled, moves almost everything else in a person's life. Beliefs are principles of action, whatever they may be at the level of the brain. They are processes by which our understanding and misunderstanding of the world is represented and made available to guide our behavior. Religious moderates are themselves the bearers of a terrible dogma. They imagine that the path to peace will be paved once each of us has learned to respect the unjustified beliefs of others. At the time, critics responded that while the beliefs of religious extremists undoubtedly played a role in the attack, Harris failed to sufficiently examine the material circumstances which drove the formation of those beliefs.
I think that in light of everything that I have realized and woken up to in regards to the Israel-Palestine conflict, like, I can see how Harris's oversimplification of blaming 9/11 on specifically religious fundamentalism alone is certainly not an appropriate analysis. We aren't a fan of Sam Harris, right? No, I think that's what I'm saying is, so first of all, I think that, okay, this is tricky because the new atheists, right? It was Richard Dawkins, I think Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and Christopher Hitchens. Like, these four guys were these like kind of revolutionary minds in atheism that brought a lot of it to public light. However, they're just four white guys, and they are like the ones that I think this video is talking about ending up like along the line of the atheist to the anti-woke right pipeline, like far right pipeline, that is so problematic. So I'm not a fan of Sam Harris. However, you know, it's so frustrating because they were kind of like the top of the funnel for me into atheism. And I think that's been true for a lot of people. So I am glad to see that there's a lot more atheist content that is being, shared out, and a lot of different kinds of content creators, a lot of content creators with different backgrounds talking more about atheism. I just put out a YouTube video about, like, it was a reaction video to another video about atheist women and why more men tend to be atheists. And in response, I got a lot of suggestions for women who are atheist content creators who I can now like explore, and I'm really going to enjoy that. Hitchens, as brilliant as he was, supported Bush and Iraq. It's a shame that these great atheist minds start dabbling in politics in this manner. Seth Andrews just started doing it too. They should just stick to debunking religion. Still love watching Sam Harris dismantle Jordan Peterson. Look, anyone who can take Jordan Peterson out is fine by me. I'm so sick of Jordan fucking Peterson. I'm sick of him. Like, so it's like, it's just a weird complex thing, because these guys brought atheism to the light in a lot of ways, and I'm glad we're moving past it. But yeah, let's see what else this video has to say. It's so unfortunate. Like, again, I don't understand how you can talk about debunking religion and dismantling patriarchal religious systems, but then end up on the far right. Like, that does not work in my brain. I don't get it. Oh.
Should atheists who assert that beliefs are a product of natural forces really treat belief as an uncaused cause in the chain of events? Regardless, Harris' approach here inspired countless atheists thereafter.
That's a really good point. One that I was going to bring up, because if we don't believe in like free will, and that, or at the very least that free will is an illusion, like if we're all just a product of our environment, I don't think it's okay to just totally blame certain groups of people on the issues of what's happening in this world. And even if that means not blaming all Muslims on what was, 9/11 was in fact, religious extremism was a factor in that, but it was also a result, more so, I would say, a result of, again, the United States being an imperialist bully. Anytime you meet a pro-Peterson person, here's a playlist for them chuds. 40 vids shitting on him. Appropriate is what I'll say to that. Appropriate. You will not see Jordan Peterson be talked about positively here.
David Silverman, once an atheist activist at the forefront of the atheist world, argued the following at Oxford Union in 2013.
Highly secular democracies consistently enjoy low rates of social dysfunction. A separate statistic called the Successful Society Scale shows a significant correlation between a country's religiosity and a lack of success as a nation. The HDI index, which measures quality of life, shows a strong negative correlation between the religiosity of a society and the happiness and well-being of its people. All neutral, all statistically significant, all supporting today's notion. Religion, of course, ignores these results, literally pretending the proof isn't there, just so it can save its supposedly perfect face. Religion isn't just wrong, ladies and gentlemen. It is pro-stagnation. And we as a society need to recognize it as such.
Silverman asserts
Hear,
that bad
hear.
ideas in the form of religion cause these societal ills. His critics, on the other hand, might say that he did not demonstrate the causal direction of these correlated factors. It may be that people embrace religion as a way to cope with difficult circumstances, which would explain the results of the studies he cited. Years later, Silverman took what he called an anti-woke position.
I had a red pill shoved up my ass right then, and that's what happened.
In 2020, Silverman responded to the murder of George Floyd by a police officer and the subsequent Black Lives Matter protests with statements like this. Felons, current not reformed, are not being forced into crime, but are making free decisions to do bad, hurt people, steal, resist arrest. They matter a lot less than kids and good people. Participation trophies suck. Some people, bad people, matter less. He reasons that felons are simply bad people who choose to do crimes because they are bad people. Therefore, we should treat them as inferior. This stands in contrast to liberal sentiments about human rights, which basically are that they should apply to everyone, no matter who they are and no matter what they've done. Silverman's reasoning is consistent with his thinking prior to him going full anti-woke. It's not material circumstances that create or drive the adoption of ideas and behaviors, he thinks. Crime is not a symptom of poverty or systemic disenfranchisement. Religious thinking isn't a result of existential insecurity. Bad ideas just exist. Bad people just exist. And this is why bad things happen. Silverman is just one example here, but I think if you observe the anti-woke right closely, you'll regularly see this pattern of thought in others, as well as in some atheists in conversations about religion. Pathologizing the other. You've all heard anti-woke guys refer to ideas they don't like as the woke mind virus, right?
So my son Xavier is dead, killed by the woke mind virus. So I vowed to destroy the woke mind virus after that.
With this phrase, they characterize such ideas as a disease, and those with whom they disagree as infected, contagious, and dangerous. In other words, they pathologize those ideas and people outside of their group. Certain atheists in the US have a history of doing the same. I'm sorry for this, Daryl. I love the resources your organization provides for apostates. I support your work there, and I want to make it clear to my audience that Daryl is definitely not the anti-woke type. But I do have to talk about the book. In the 2009 book, The God Virus, atheist activist and psychologist Daryl Ray wrote, "Imagine that religion is a virus with its own unique mix of properties. Just as the HIV virus is different than a cold virus, both infect and take over the mechanisms of the body in ways that allow them to reproduce. Religions infect people, create antibodies or defenses against other viruses, take over mental and physical functions, and hide itself within the individual in such a way that is not detectable by the individual, use specific methods for spreading the virus, and program the host to replicate the virus. Every religion is more or less effective in each of these areas." 4 years later, atheist writer Peter Boghossian took this even further in A Manual for Creating Atheists. Page 208. The chapter is called Containment Protocols. Right after quoting that Daryl Ray passage I just read, Boghossian says, "Just as the body is exposed to toxins, so is the mind. Faith is an unclassified cognitive illness disguised as a moral virtue. Each of us dreads the thought of becoming ill, and we take whatever measures necessary to regain our health. Not so with the faith virus. People infected by faith feel gratitude and appreciation for their affliction." To eradicate this cognitive illness, Boghossian proposed that we stigmatize faith-based claims like racist claims. Funny enough, this is followed by a Sam Harris, The End of Faith quote. "People who harbor strong convictions without evidence belong at the margins of our societies, not in our halls of power." Yeah, I don't like strong convictions without evidence, but saying that we should marginalize people I don't know about that one. One mid to long-term containment objective is to stigmatize faith as a methodology and faith-based claims that emerge from that methodology the way racist statements have been stigmatized. I've previously argued, along with Shermer, that's Michael Shermer, and others, that we need to deploy the model used in the civil rights movement. I'll put this quote.
So this brings up another point of how I've been trying not to use exclusionary language against Christians as opposed to specifically fighting against the religion of Christianity. Because I agree with genetically modified skeptic here. I don't think that in my intention to be a part of building a secular pluralist leftist society, it would be fair. In fact, it would be hypocritical of me to say, but Christians don't have a place at the table, right? So I'm really glad he's covering it like this, because if we start to and this is tricky, because Christians right now in the United States are claiming that they're being persecuted and that their faith is under attack and all of this stuff all of the time. And it's actual bullshit, because when you are the largest population, when you do have representatives of Christian nationalism in power, you can't be persecuted. You are the dominant culture and belief system. So that's just ridiculous. But it would be unfair of us to eventually, build this great secular utopia and not have any room for Christians. What we shouldn't have room for is Christian ideology, like specifically. Not that Christian ideology can't have any influence in policies that we make, but it just needs to be reflected in a sense that it's still a communally, also secular in emphasis on the motivations behind the society we built. So that's just an interesting tension between not wanting to hate Christians, but fighting actively against the institution of Christianity that's honestly harming Christians just as much as everyone else. So what have I missed? Religion should have no influence in the state, and the state shouldn't have any influence in religion. Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that. I think what I mean is just like not actively using exclusionary language to, as genetically modified skeptic is saying here, like end up marginalizing Christians. I mean, like way down the line, like you can't like Christians are in no way marginalized right now. I'm just trying to be conscious of that moving forward. Yes, religion and state need to be completely separate, but that doesn't mean that I don't want any Christians specifically like in political positions or in, involved in the conversations at all. I just don't want them to have the power to enforce their dominance over anyone else. It's just a weird tension, but I do agree with you on the separation of church and state. So all good points all around. We're doing great. Religious repression either way shouldn't exist. Exactly. Atheism shouldn't be a state religion either. Exactly. Great point. Great points all around.
On screen instead of reading through all of this, but I'm not exactly sure that purposely marginalizing people for their religious beliefs is akin to something that was done in the civil rights movement to fight racism. Boghossian proposes that we treat faith as a public health crisis. Just as society has established mechanisms to deal with contagions, pathogens, and infectious diseases that affect our water, air, and food supply, with objectives like ensuring that the commons are free of toxins and preventing the spread of diseases, there's also an urgent need for large-scale interventions in educational systems, houses of worship, and other institutions that promote failed epistemologies. He advocates that psychiatrists remove religious exemption for delusion from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Actually putting my psychology degree to use here, the reason why religious ideas, be they supernaturalist or otherwise, are not considered to be delusions in the DSM is because they don't disrupt what psychologists would call or psychiatrists would call normative functioning. They don't disrupt your everyday life most of the time. In fact, they can actually add to your functioning and your well-being in everyday life. They're not kind of an unequivocally bad thing that mess things up for you. That's why they're not disorders. Sometimes religious beliefs, of course, can be harmful to yourself, and others lead to behaviors that are harmful for yourself and others, but they don't do so consistently enough to be considered pathological. It is crucial that the religious exemption for delusion be removed from the DSM. Once religious delusions are integrated into the DSM, entirely new categories of research and treatment into the problem of faith can be created. These will include removal of existing ethical barriers, changing treatments covered by insurance, including faith-based special education programs in the schools, helping children who have been indoctrinated into a faith tradition, and legitimizing interventions designed to rid subjects of the faith affliction. Removing the exemption that classifies a phenomenon as an officially recognized psychiatric disorder legitimizes research designed to cure the disorder. Why did we ever think this was worth promoting? Boghossian has since made a career out of opposing what he calls woke ideology, regularly referring to ideas with which he disagrees as pathologies. Atheism has been parasitized by social justice. Elon Musk says, yes. Himmler says, the woke mind virus is penetrating the firewalls of some of the smartest meat computers at a prodigious rate. Peter Boghossian replies, correct. Idea laundering is the mechanism the woke mind virus uses to legitimate itself.
There's a particularly powerful, Wilfred Riley calls it, a virus of the upper lower class. There's a particularly powerful mind virus in that you can think about it like a memeplex. And those beliefs literally exists to rip down Western civilization.
I'd argue that one of the very foundations of anti-woke thinking is the view that a broad variety of ideas and identities are pathologies and are representative of mental illness or inferiority. Under the guise of free speech advocacy, the anti-woke argue for private and public policies which aid their efforts to treat ideas and identities they don't like as diseases. Of course, the effect of these policies does not actually favor freedom of expression, but seeks to suppress it under the guise of concern for public health. Florida, arguably the anti-woke mecca, now treats gender diversity in its prison inmates as a mental illness to be cured, in stark disagreement with the consensus in the field of psychiatry that it is not. The state's utilization of public health infrastructure to cure short-term delusions in people the anti-woke don't like is eerily similar to the strategy Boghossian suggested to eliminate the faith virus. Pathologizing the other does exactly what Boghossian suggests it should, removes ethical barriers, and legitimizes interventions designed to rid subjects of the affliction. Big video on this coming eventually. I've been working on this for so long, it's taken so long to research and write that I decided to use this video as kind of stepping stone toward that, so expect me to kind of repeat this point, but hopefully even better later on down the road in a much larger video. So, when atheists started doing a version of this, calling religion a disease, it's no wonder that it attracted men like Boghossian, who would later become known primarily as an anti-woke pundit. For the next section, I'm bringing on my friend and fellow YouTuber Ocean Keltoy. We became friends when I still called myself an anti-theist several years ago, and he played a significant part in my transition out of that and into my current position, which is in support of religious pluralism. You ever just casually debate with someone?
I've seen some of Genetically Modified Skeptics' videos, but I didn't know that he used to call himself anti-theist and then transition to atheism to maintain religious pluralism, because I think one of the, two things. I think one of the traps that a lot of people can fall into when they maybe transition to atheism or deconstruct from like evangelical Christianity is to replace their previous dogma with a new dogmas, because dogma, like, and the rigidity of like calling religion a disease and being anti-theist, that can be almost like a security blanket in the sense that it's still kind of dogmatic and there's no wiggle room and there's no openness to see alternative perspectives. And a lack of religious pluralism, I think, is just as damaging as enforced religious fundamentalism. So I'm really glad that Genetically Modified Skeptic brought that up here, because I am very much a pluralist. That's why I say, like, I don't want an atheist country. I want a pluralist country where everyone has a seat on at the table. The state calling something a disease an example of Foucault's biopower. The moral framework serves the ideology, like when they made gay sex a crime and then a disease. Yes, that's a great point. Yeah. What's your thoughts on the take? If I was to worship something, it'd be doubt. That's a great. So the idea of like approaching everything with skepticism and doubt, I think is one of the most freeing ways, like one of the most empowering ways to exist. I mean, you have to be careful of not. I mean, okay, you're gonna find out by following, by us having these conversations more, that the most important thing to me with any concept we talk about is finding the balance and equilibrium. And so when I think about doubt, like there's going to be two sides to the end of this spectrum here. I think it's important to approach things critically and skeptically, but as long as you have the grounding to not fall into the trap of essentially like existential nihilism and just staying there, like I think a lot of people who deconstruct from religion can fall into like pessimistic nihilism and existentialism. And I think that can be a really important part of our journey to kind of see how you deal with that without the promise of an afterlife, etc. But, to stay in that world, to stay in that darkness, like I've been there, and to just constantly live in doubt can be really harmful. So to be a little bit vulnerable here, I also, I can be really prone to magical thinking. There's like a history of my family, like there's family history of like psychosis and delusions and all of the things. And I have gone through like a full-fledged 2-month-long, like professionally diagnosed psychosis with hearing voices and thinking that aliens were communicating with me through the internet and all of the things. And there's a lot that goes into that story. Just like a quick side note, I'm not going to trauma dump, but really I was I was living with an older man. I'd been with him for a couple of years. I was financially dependent on him. It was a very dark relationship. It was a very unhealthy relationship, and I was not safe at all. And so my brain falsified this reality. It like created this false reality where I was living in this psychosis. Essentially because my brain was like, you're not safe. We literally need to fabricate something else. Like, don't worry. I ended up leaving him like 6 months after the brain fog cleared. But what that experience taught me was how, even as an atheist and even as someone who doesn't even like actually trust anything I see, like after that experience, I kind of fell into doubting every thought I had, like for good reason. Like I saw firsthand how easy the mind can create an illusion, a reality that is not grounded. And so after that, it took me a long time to kind of get grounded again and trust myself and trust my thoughts, not to mention healing from the relationship, like hand in hand. So I'm glad you bring up doubt, but it is important to me that we make the intention of finding a way to stay grounded. Usually this means grounded in a community, because when you have other people giving you feedback, you're gonna stay grounded. When we're all so isolated these days and not having real conversations, like, it's gonna feel a lot easier to be alone and lose the sense of what really is going on and what's really important. So kind of a tangent, but an important one nonetheless. I don't like theism. It's simply non-belief. Its extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Agreed. That's it. That to me isn't theism. I agree. Again, I've talked about this a little bit before, but the reason I like all of my social media profiles say, or bios say, atheist leftist, is kind of like a calling card, and also like just to take like a very intentional stance against the religious right. So let's see what else genetically modified skeptic has to say.
And then end up getting wrecked so badly that you end up thanking them. Yeah, that was a humbling experience, and Ocean was very nice about it. I would highly recommend it.
Hey Drew, thanks for reaching out. I appreciate the opportunity. I think it's something worth pointing out is that anti-theism and pluralism are, as you no doubt learned, incompatible. Anti-theists seem to default to anti-pluralist arguments, and anti-theism is, on the other hand, strangely compatible with Christian nationalism on subjects like imperialism. And we've been seeing that manifest in recent years. And it seems like it shouldn't be the case, but the two have found themselves snuggling lately. And you may wonder, what the hell is this? Let's start with answering what anti-theism is in the first place. Sometimes when people are referring to anti-theism, they are referring to a 19th century usage, meaning someone who affirms that there is no God. But today, the term most often references the usage of Christopher Hitchens. In Letters to a Young Contrarian, he writes, "I'm not even an atheist so much as I am an anti-theist. I not only maintain that all religions are versions of the same untruth, but I hold that the influence of churches and the effect of religious belief is positively harmful." Anti-theism generally manifests as an opposition to the existence of religion because religious belief is necessarily harmful. Reasons for this are often given that focus primarily on the most extreme, while still popular, versions of Christianity and Islam. Many of these would be fair criticisms if they were just kept on target. The problem is, these criticisms of extremism would get applied to Christianity and Islam broadly, without regard for the varying differences in traditions across these faiths, and then, without skipping a beat, all of religion generally. So, to take an example that New Atheism would often focus on, conservative evangelical Christianity often requires a belief in creationism. Creationism is anti-science. So, Christianity is anti-science. Religion, all of it, is harmful because it is anti-science, you see. The target gets broader and broader until you get a statement that is akin to taking a shotgun to a cricket. Often, with anti-theist rhetoric, the word religion is just lazy language referring to specific forms of monotheist traditions. So, a common belief that comes along with anti-theism is that these problems that we have in society would just be solved if we just stopped being religious. However, I think it's become more clear over time, especially since the heyday of New Atheism, that the relationship between being religious and something like being anti-science may have some correlation, but not quite causation. There seems to be a wealth of atheists out there who are willing to be anti-science, and there are plenty of religious people who are aggressively pro-science. This would mean that whatever causes stuff like anti-science beliefs is not necessarily religion or God belief. It's something else, and if we're interested in truth, we should be focused on finding out more about that, rather than blaming the thing that feels good to blame. This proclivity among anti-theists actually creates an ally in Christian nationalism, weirdly enough. While anti-theism and Christian nationalism would seem to be more at odds than bedfellows, they share an imperialist desire to wipe out other religions, including Christianity. And now I know that seems weird, but let me explain. Anti-theists certainly have criticisms of Christian nationalism, no doubt about that. But when anti-theists talk about Islam, Hinduism, paganism, witchcraft, or any other religious tradition, the Christian nationalists will simply nod along, or at the very least, stay out of their way. The enemy of my enemy will do my work. But anti-theist rhetoric against Christianity will often work in favor of Christian nationalism, aiding in their imperialist mission. I described the lack of subtlety that anti-theists often have when discussing Christianity. This process essentializes the worst parts of Christianity into defining Christianity. Anti-theist rhetoric would have you believe that true Christianity is sexist, transphobic, homophobic, xenophobic, racist, and any litany of other bigotries. And the Christian nationalist goes, yeah, you're exactly right. All those progressive Christians out there, not real Christians. The Christian nationalist will say to the progressive Christian, listen to those who are politically on your side. They think you're LARPing. They don't respect you. They think you're just playing at your religion. Just ask them. If you want to be a Christian, you got to be one of us. It's imperialism within Christianity, and anti-theists are used to that end. Sometimes the quiet part is said out loud, or the imperialism is just done explicitly. Viewers of this channel are no doubt familiar with Ayaan Hirsi Ali, who recently publicly converted from atheism to Christianity. In her article explaining this, called Why I Am Now a Christian, she describes part of her journey to Christianity in terms of a pragmatic nationalist narrative rather than any particular theological argument or religious experience. For her, Christianity is the best defender of Western civilization against Russian and Chinese authoritarianism, Islamism, and the woke. A response to this was published by Michael Shermer, another noted atheist/anti-theist, who says that he agrees with the threats to Western civilization, but he credits Enlightenment humanism rather than Christianity as the great defender of the West. The problem is that they're both playing this same imperialist game, and both to the advantage of Christian nationalism. In his response, he performs exactly the method that I described earlier of essentializing the worst of Christianity and Islam into religion generally as part of framing the superiority of the Enlightenment. Pause if you want to go through it. Enlightenment thought and Christian thought have had their moments of converging on imperialism. I want to give an example that I came across rather accidentally while researching for my own channel. Professor of Classics, Paige Du Bois, in her book on academic bias against polytheism called A Million and One Gods, discusses the German philosopher Hegel and his theories on religion. He viewed the religions of the world in terms of a hierarchy of spiritual development with his own Protestant Christianity at the top. Big surprise. Now, he ranked Hinduism particularly low on this scale. I didn't seem to know much about Hinduism, but that doesn't stop Hegel. While analyzing it, he said to his listening students, "It is difficult to get the sense of an alien religion from within. To put oneself in the place of a dog requires the sensibilities of a dog." Now, to be clear, according to one anonymous transcript, this is not true. He actually said elephant. So you see, these two forces converge on their imperialist goals. Anti-theism at large seems not to have unpacked this aspect. I believe if they had, they would just no longer be anti-theists. And that's not to say that Christianity and the Enlightenment haven't contributed positively to society. Of course they have. But maybe we should be having these conversations with a broader set of perspectives at the table. Perhaps when investigating Hinduism, it may be preferable to first listen to the Hindu rather than Hegel. This general process of thinking, however, is dismissed as woke. And for both the anti-theist and the Christian nationalist, prioritizing the voice of a Hindu on Hinduism is problematic. Fortunately, they have found a one-word way of dismissing the entire prospect. On top of this, the Christian nationalist can say this through the mouth of the anti-theist, appealing to those who might not otherwise listen. In the words of an old friend, tearing things down is easy. Building things up is hard. And I can poke holes in anti-theist thought all day, and this is really the tip of the iceberg, but what good is that without an alternative? Drew and I are mutual appreciators of Chrissy Stroop, a journalist who has produced a wealth of work on pluralism, including some handy-dandy infographics. Stroop writes that pluralism refers to people of diverse and conflicting beliefs coexisting peaceably, linked by their adherence to a shared social contract which commits members of different groups to treating others fairly and accommodating them equally in the public square. In a society with a wealth of perspectives ranging across gender, religion, ethnicity, race, sexuality, and a myriad of other categories, it seems at least pragmatic to have a foundation that allows us to listen to each other's perspectives and contribute ideas to our broader conversations. This pluralism should have standards, to be sure, with considerations to concepts such as the paradox of tolerance, separation of church and state, and the free expression of religion. But the goal of peaceful coexistence in a diverse society is a worthy goal, and it is one that both Christian nationalism and anti-theism would stand against, and for many of the same reasons. With that, I hand you back to Drew. Feel free to check out my channel in which I discuss polytheism and Germanic spirituality, religion of the Vikings basically, also known as heathenry. If you're here from my channel, hit that subscribe button. Drew makes a ton of great content and has long been a supportive friend. Back to you, sir.
Contrarianism.
How cute.
Most people in the world.
Not to like belittle it, but I really liked that. That really did kind of challenge me to, because when I was like in shaping the content that I'm making that people are really resonating with, like I do feel challenged to find the balance between, again, calling out the harm that the organization, the institution of mostly just the Christian religious leaders who are taking advantage of their constituents right now in the United States in order to gain favor with political leaders, and how all of this is just becoming this intertwined mess, and everyone is being harmed by it, but more, the Christian nationalists don't even realize they're being harmed by it. So it's a very interesting thing to navigate. I really appreciate this perspective about pluralism and anti-theism not being able to cohabitate. Again, because I think that when atheism becomes too dogmatic, it's defeating its own purpose. Let's wrap up this video. I want to see what he says about contrarianism. Which, okay, all right, hold on. This is exactly what I'm saying about being dogmatic about atheism. If this is what Genetically Modified Skeptic is about to talk about, I guess his name's Drew. We just learned that from the other guy. If he's about to talk about how contrarianism is just kind of like the other side of being dogmatic about what it's so great to like leave the trappings of religion and be like, haha, I'd been fooled this whole time. You guys are still being fooled and now I'm right. But in reality, like it's so much more complex than that. So let's get into it.
World are religious, and even those who aren't are still more likely than not to believe in some sort of higher power. Some of the most powerful institutions in the world draw their authority from religion, and religion heavily impacts cultural norms basically everywhere. Choosing to stand apart from that by calling yourself an atheist can be a socially dangerous thing to do. I believe this acts as a selection pressure on the atheist world, selecting for those that have a contrarian aspect to their personalities and against those who do not. Straight-up antisocial attitudes may even be selected for in contexts where a person would face more stigma, such as in older, more religious generations and in more religious societies. The existence of this selection pressure does not suggest that all atheists are contrarian or antisocial, just that more atheists might be than the average population. The world of atheist celebrities, where people face stigma head-on in a very public way, is particularly affected by this selection pressure, I think. Richard Dawkins has long exemplified this.
How many of you believe in God? Okay, a forest of hands. So Richard Dawkins, these people are deluded. Every single one of them.
Well, I fear that's right, yes. I would say it's rather like the phenomenon of the imaginary friend that children have and that comfort them and console them, but there's actually not the slightest shred of evidence that any kind of supernatural being exists. So I'm sorry to say, deluded, yes.
To be clear, I'm not saying that this is an inherently bad thing. Prevailing norms and institutions need to be challenged at times. I'm actually glad that when certain American schools tried to add young Earth creationism to science curricula, folks like Dawkins stood up and said, no, that's bullshit. But contrarian and antisocial attitudes cut both ways. When women began finding prominence in the atheist skeptic world and said that men should stop harassing them, or at least be cognizant of ways they might make women in the community uncomfortable, Dawkins polemicized against them. And now, when most atheists surveyed say that society has not gone far enough to accept and support trans people, Dawkins has joined the coalition of the anti-woke, gender-critical folks.
In this movement, the people who are willing to speak on this issue are often people who have been through some crucible beforehand. And those can be good, bad, or indifferent things as far as I'm concerned. Lots of Brexiteers, lots of anti-vaxxers, lots of evangelical Christians, people who have had some formative experience, like, I think, probably you sticking with atheist rationalism while the new atheist movement degenerated into gender woo.
Dawkins believes that support for trans people is the majority position and is actually so dominant that it somehow victimizes those who don't support trans people.
How has one side managed to kind of capture the dominant dialogue, really, the dominant half of the dialogue? Why does all the abuse go one way? Why is it such a...
Yeah.
Why does all the bullying go one way?
This is blatantly false, of course. Don't make me tap the ACLU bill tracker map, and I cover this in more detail in my recent video about Dawkins, but still, Dawkins feels like there is pressure to conform, and his contrarian side seems to have informed his takes on this to the very apparent detriment of his science advocacy.
When you think about the God delusion, when you think about what he's done for evolution, what is he famous for exactly? It's that he has taken a kind of contrarian approach to things a lot of people reject. And the thing is, when it comes to evolution, he's right. When it comes to atheism, he's right. He is so used to being the guy calling out the emperor for wearing no clothes. The guy who says, you're all wrong about this thing, but I'm right about it. So I think when it comes to trans people as well, he thinks all of you have bought into this lie about trans people, but I know the truth, and I can talk to people who agree with me. And so, yeah, the fact that you're all mad at me, the fact that you and me are having this conversation, that just proves I'm right. Because you know what I'm good at? It's being the voice in the room that tells you the truth when everyone else is wrong. Except that doesn't work when you're actually wrong about something. And I don't think there's anyone in his life willing to tell him, dude, no, you're just wrong about this.
Also, given that trans people are such a small minority, most people don't just learn about and develop an understanding of their experiences without purposely trying. Even in the mostly trans-affirming atheist world, it can still take some extra curiosity about and empathy for people with whom you differ to learn about what trans people want, need, and fear. Those with more antisocial tendencies are less likely to put in this effort and are more likely to react negatively to those they don't understand. So it's not that surprising that edgy atheist guys like Dawkins have found a home in the less than pro-social world of the anti-woke, where polemicizing against people that are not well understood is kind of the point. Now, before I leave you, I want to remind you of the fact with which I opened this video. Atheists, on average, are more likely to be on the left, to be LGBT allies, to be what the anti-woke guys call woke, than nearly any other group. The anti-woke atheist bros mentioned in this video can be very loud, but they clearly do not represent regular atheists, and I think that some of their recent outbursts stem from their rude awakenings to that fact. If you're looking for allies as someone on the left and or as a queer person, don't assume that people who use the label atheist are automatically anti-woke. They're usually not. Most atheist organizations are also worth getting involved with. American Atheists, Secular Student Alliance, Freedom from Religion Foundation, Secular Coalition for America, Recovering from Religion, American Humanist Association, and plenty of others are committed to protecting the civil rights of all people and creating a better world for the marginalized. Don't avoid getting involved with them just because the most famous atheist guys you're aware of are insufferable edgelords. Trust me, I know a lot of the people who run these organizations, and they are frustrated with anti-woke atheist antics more than just about anyone else. That said, in the description, I am going to list a couple of organizations that are very anti-woke, which I do not recommend getting involved with. They mostly just, tweet and blog anyway. So, yes, there is an atheist to anti-woke pipeline, but most atheists have not fallen down it. And plenty of we atheists are doing our best to keep the pipeline from drawing in any more of our own. Thanks for watching. I've been Drew of Genetically Modified Skeptic.
Wow. That was a really good video. That warms my heart. You know, I will admit that when I first started diving into atheist content and when I really just embraced the label of atheist, because one of the books that helped me leave Christianity was Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and she was not only was she very far libertarian conservative in her politics, but she also was very openly non-feminist. Ayn Rand is quoted saying, "I believe that the ideal man is a hero and the ideal woman is a hero worshiper. And that really did not resonate with me at all. But I do have to credit Ayn Rand with helping me leave the Christian faith. So again, it's like these anti-woke, far-right atheists, like they have these platforms to really draw people in and help them kind of liberate themselves from belief systems that are harmful. But it is kind of weird that those ones with the platforms, like they didn't go far enough in their own journey to end up on the side of everyone on this planet, on the side of the working class, on the side of people who struggle because a system that is designed to exploit them. So it does kind of warm my heart that genetically modified skeptic here, oh, I can call him Drew now. I know his name is Drew now, but that Drew has made a video like this, and I've seen a couple of his other videos, and so this isn't like a surprise of his, that he's takes this stance. Jesus, I can't talk, but yeah, this was a great video. I really appreciated it. Thank you for watching it with me, you guys.